Nazi leader Hermann Göring gave a simple and lucid explanation of how to frighten people into supporting a war they would otherwise oppose. He said, "The people don't want war, but they can always be brought to do the bidding of their leaders. This is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they are being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and for exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country." So this is clever psychology. Make people think they are under imminent threat, in danger. Think the myth of weapons of mass destruction. But it could be anything, an invisible enemy or a virus or anything. It doesn't matter what. Tell them that you, i.e. the leaders, are the only ones who can protect them. Denounce and silence anyone who disagrees or even questions things, and then you can get people to do anything you want, including die for some purely imaginary cause. Think about the huge events of the 21st century so far, and of which we are still living through the consequences. I would say that some of the front runners in the UK are the illegal invasion of Iraq, which radicalised hundreds of thousands of young Muslims, and the consequent war on terror. And I would also say Brexit and now COVID. The war on terror, Brexit and COVID, the holy trinity. They are, I suggest, the same thing, just wearing a different mask. In each case, the psychology forms the same pattern. Create a fear, it doesn't matter what it is, just create a crisis and a fear and tell people what must be done to save them, and then strip away their autonomy and freedoms. In fact, we are told that the loss of our freedoms is an essential part of fighting this imaginary monster ready to gobble us up. Why do this? Well, surely the penny has dropped by now, that the world has changed beyond recognition, and that a group of people, fantastically powerful and wealthy, some of whom I named, like the biggest shadow bank in the world, the BlackRock Investment Company, simply want everything for themselves. It's that simple. And politicians, the media, the universities, the chattering class, all ably assist them without necessarily even knowing that's what they're doing. So think of it, this trinity of events over roughly 20 years, the war on terror, Brexit, COVID, as one event, one story. And if it was a fairy story, it would run like this. The wicked stepmother or father tells the little child, let's call her Jenny, that something terrible has happened. A monster has arrived. It's the most horrible monster imaginable, with red eyes and a forked tongue and teeth that bite and tear. And this monster hates little children, and if they fall into its clutches, they are imprisoned or murdered or worse. The wicked step-parent tells Jenny she can no longer go to school because the monster might be there, and she has to wear a mask in the hope the monster won't recognise her. And she must keep her thoughts to herself in case she says or thinks anything that angers the monster. And she'll be punished if she doesn't do all of these things, and more, punished for her own good. And if she's a bad girl, disobedient, the monster will know and be even more angry with her. Every day, the wicked step-parent tells her more stories about this monster so that it grows in her imagination until she can't sleep and is afraid of her own shadow. And she will never be disobedient again, and she will never learn anything, and she will never grow up into a responsible, feeling, thinking adult. She will be in a state of permanent arrested development. The monster is in her head. It's all she sees. She is frozen with fear, paralysed by confusion. And with that comes complete subservience to the wicked step-parent. And that's, by and large, what has happened to us, step by step, year by year, legislation by legislation. The media drip feeds this poison brew into our bloodstreams every day, on the hour, and because people are addicted, they can't stop watching or listening. We are little Jenny, the terrified child hiding in her room, scared of everything. We have become infantilized, and we have allowed it to happen. We are like a little kingdom of Jennies, all scared of the monster. But hopefully, not all of us. So what can we do? Well, for one thing, we stop listening to the wicked step-parent because we know they are only interested in their own power. And my God, they are so boring. Then we decide that we are going to go outside and see what's there and think about it and make our own decisions and have our own thoughts. And if there really is a monster, then we take it on, but from a position of independence and power, not cowering in fear. We might tame it, we might kill it, we might get destroyed by it, but at least we tried. Or we might discover that there is no monster. Only the wicked step-parent and the lies fed to us. That's the monster. It's like the Wizard of Oz, a bloke hiding behind a screen, pretending to be something huge and frightening. Reality has become smoke and mirrors, a phantasmal filigree in which we can only discern vague shapes. So we live in a repetitive cycle of fear, creation and censorship, of questioning, and anything is thrown into the mix to intensify the fear and confusion, whether it's GM crops, global warming. And because the purpose is to create fear and confusion, it negates the possibility of grown-up discussion about these things. Dialogue is replaced by anxiety. Thought is overshadowed by irrational feeling. The only time it backfired was with Brexit. This was a wake-up call, though, for the political class, and luckily they had the pandemic roll up conveniently afterwards. In these things, the use of words is crucial. Persuader words, power words. Think of the word terror. It's a hammer horror word. The problem is, it's one-way traffic. So the illegal invasion of a country and the murder of over 1 million people, many of them women and children, was part of a war on terror? I don't think so. I think it ignited a lot of terror and a backlash of more terror. So thank you, George W. and Teflon Tone, for that. Another phrase related to that, web of evil, meaning everything and nothing. And think of the words used with Brexit. If you vote to leave, there will be collapse, disaster. The Bank of England manager waiving all political neutrality, saying there would be overnight economic collapse. COVID is a word riddled with plague associations. It isn't just a virus, it's a lexicon of fear and death, triggered by the repetition of the word like a mantra. And a popular word used with it is wave. Are we now in the third or the fourth or the fifth wave? It doesn't matter, because waves are never ending. Tides are eternal. There's always another wave coming. So all these things get into our collective unconscious. And we are being prepared for the declaration that this may never go away. Always another wave, another mutation, another variant. So all these words, terror, disaster, collapse, evil, plague, wave, are highly emotive and create a map of fear, confusion and despair in people's minds. And that makes us puppets in someone else's show. Fear, of course, can be a healthy psychological reaction. You sense danger and you take steps to avert it, but not if fear is used to paralyse. Then you are a rabbit in headlights, to be mown down or caught and controlled for whatever purpose, skinned and eaten. And that's the sort of fear that is manufactured and disseminated. Former US National Security Advisor Brzezinski argues that the use of the term war on terror was intended to generate a culture of fear deliberately because, and I'm quoting, it obscures reason, intensifies emotions, and makes it easier for demagogic politicians to mobilise the public on behalf of the policies they want to pursue. In Brazil, the authoritarian state used to punish soldiers who questioned anything by declaring them legally dead. And this is simply an extreme form of the cancel culture we're now familiar with. You cease to exist because you dare to think or speak against the tide. Politicians such as Bush and Tony Blair stumbled on this new propaganda tool to restore their power and authority, create the fear of an organised web of evil from which they could protect people. And smartphones and social media reinforce this bombardment of fear. And then endless legislation and regulations, such as we are now experiencing. You try to travel and see how ludicrously complex it is, which are there to deliberately confuse us and limit our spheres of movement and freedom. Politicians like this are petty tyrants, bullies. Strong leadership does not have to bully or cancel or create fear and confusion. Strong leadership exults in the freedom of all, as long as they do no harm. So the continuing fear-mongering over COVID is simply a perpetuity of the fear of global terrorism. The war against terror, which Tony Blair smugly announced, will never end. And now the war against a virus which will similarly run for years. And when Blair said that people would be prepared to sacrifice some of their freedoms to be kept safe, he meant he had already stripped away many freedoms to keep people in a state of subservient fear. The clever part of their strategy is that there are elements of truth in these things: terrorism, disease, illness. But when you're faced with difficulties, you need evidence, verifiable information, rational thought, and steps to reduce risks. What we have now is biased, often one-sided opinion rather than information, propaganda rather than facts, confusion and fear rather than thought, and blind obedience to often arbitrary orders and laws and rules. Think that, don't do this. Our thinking is done for us, and the danger is that we get out of the habit. The thinking that is done supposedly on our behalf is simply to kowtow us into a herd mentality, a herd that will blindly run off a mountain when told to. Shami Chakrabarti, who once worked as a lawyer in the Home Office, explained the theory of frog boiling. She said, if you throw live frogs into a pan of boiling water, they will sensibly jump out and save themselves. But if you put them in a pan of cold water and gently apply heat until the water boils, they will line the pan and boil to death. It's like that. And she said, in Blair, you see the champion frog boiler of modern times. An average of 2,663 new laws were added every year under Blair. His administration was the most prolific, introducing a total of 26,849 new laws, more than any other PM. So many of these laws are paraded as protection and safety, but were actually about curtailing freedoms. And we are increasingly encouraged to be proud of our subservience. Just look at the hideous virtue signalling over vaccinations that appears on mainstream media and all over things like Facebook. I mean, Facebook, for God's sake. Simpering at the camera and saying, look how good I am. I've let a complete stranger stick a needle in my arm and pump me with largely untested crap that has God knows what in it. And a lot of people, like me, have had the vaccinations only because we know that we will lose all ability to travel. And that's a high price to pay. We're between a rock and a hard place. But let's not pretend we are being anything other than complicit in a propaganda war. Well, what can we do? Well, I suggest that we are frightened of the wrong things. We should not be frightened of a COVID pandemic. We should fear people who tell us that unless we are frightened of the pandemic, there is something wrong with us and we are being irresponsible. We should be wary of people who know nothing, such as the psychologically infantile truant Greta Thunberg, who witters on blandly and is, to my and a lot of sensible people's horror, not only taken seriously, but is asked to be part of international platforms as a consultant. This is the babies running the creche, the lunatics running the asylum, the fear terrorists running the media. We should continue to speak, even if we are cancelled. Someone might be listening. We should question everything we are told. We should find alternative sources of news and information, alternative sources of entertainment that aren't simply bubblegum propaganda. We should make it clear at every available opportunity that we have had enough. And then the wicked spell woven around us in the fairy tale can be broken.